very much, Brad. It's just a great pleasure to be here and share some of my thoughts on important work that you're all doing and some of the traction that you are probably looking for in terms of health policy development. I'm going to start off with a little story. For those of you who need to be warned, it's a kind of has violence and audience discretion is advised. But a surgeon, an internist, and a GP went duck hunting together. This is relevant to the presentation, but I know it really is, trust me. They went duck hunting together. And the surgeon, being a very precise individual, as surgeons are, they know black, white, they know no shades of grey, took his rifle, whatever they used, pointed to the sky, and he said, "Duck!" Bang! This animal came floating down. Well, the internist said, saw a bird going over, and he said, "Duck, exclude partridge, exclude pigeon." Bang! Bang! This duck came floating down. The GP took out a machine gun and went, "Duck, duck, 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 duck." I don't know what that was, but I sure got it. So, in that context, remember that story as we go through this presentation. I'm going to be reading, which I don't often do, but I have a terrific kind of breadth to cover. So it's the only way I can get through my 45 minutes, and when Brad stands up, I'm done. So to avoid the confusion that I know anything about the science of genetics, I've decided to stick to my knitting and approach this talk from my personalized vantage point as a lapsed laboratory-based researcher, evidence-based methodologist, oncologist, and policy decision-maker, through experience doing in academia, in government, clinical trials development, etc. However, this broad-based experience only allows me to present a Forrest Gump view of personalized medicine, so you have to bear with me during this presentation for those of you who are really high-tech and knowledgeable in the area. I'm going to be taking you on a journey, and there are going to be 3 ports of call. The first port of call will examine the continuum of evidence to policy decision-making. For anyone hoping to gain traction on new health technologies, it's important to understand the reality of increasing emphasis on an evidence-based approach to policy decision-making. It's become the battle cry of almost every health system in the world. With fiscal constraint, there's very little else we have now, apart from evidence, with which to make difficult decisions in a consistent, credible, transparent, and fair way. The second port of call will be examining personalized medicine and its clinical research and provide some of the clinical trials and policy implications of personalized medicine, whatever that is, and we'll come to that. And the third port of call will be dealing with personalized predictive genetic testing and its clinical research and policy implications. And this is truly disruptive, and it's going to be growing increasingly and very rapidly with the advent of genome sequencing for individuals at a cost of less than $1,000, and that's on us right now. So let's start with the first port of call. I want to make 2 general observations as it applies to personalized medicine. It is important, firstly, to define where research ends and where and how you are hoping to get traction in the healthcare system. Because I've attended a number of meetings where there's an expectation that research will kind of get traction in the health system before it's gone through the normal processes that we expect in health systems. And the second is to understand the societal and ethical considerations associated with important work that you're doing. It's estimated that new health technologies account for 60 to 70% of inflation-adjusted increases in healthcare spending. And I know I run an evidence-based shop, and I know that the number of new technologies that are on us, that are kind of accumulating at a very rapid rate, it's very reassuring, and it's neat, but it's also increasing the pressure to the system. And we need a credible and fair decision-making process. And genomics needs to step in line as one of those pressures, and I mean pressure in a positive sense, not in a negative sense. So I want to move now to our the first port of call. That's the reality and increasing importance of an evidence approach to policy decision making. So I'm going to give you my perspective from an Ontario from an Ontario kind of setting. I really do not mean to bring Ontario's experience to BC and tell you this is the way to do things. God forbid. I would never do that. You have your own realities to deal with. But I'm going to use this as an example for you to get an understanding of how evidence can be effective in informing decision making. So what is evidence? Well, I Googled it about 3 years ago. This no longer appears on the Google site, but evidence is defined as Michael Coretta, better known as Evidence, is an American hip-hop artist, producer, and member of the rap group Dilated Peoples. Well, I know Dilated Pupils, and that, frankly, never heard of Dilated Peoples, and that just dates me. And the other one, which I think is really great, is it's a science fiction story by Isaac Asimov. My definition of evidence is the assembly and presentation of facts weighed against a scientifically validated hierarchy. It allows the quality of evidence to be described and compared. And that's the world we live in. And that's the world increasingly we're expected to sort of parachute our new health technologies into. And health technology assessment is usually achieved through the systematic review of literature and economic analysis. I want to take you through the life diffusion cycle of technology, and I want you to put genomics in the context of what I'm about to put up. So the vertical axis is utilization, the horizontal axis is time, and the first phase of the life cycle is research and development. Once the technology undergoes regulatory approval, is what I call the inflection point of the diffusion curve. And this is where most evidence-based units are positioned at this time. Our units at Medical Advisory Secretariat, NICE in the UK, MSAC in Australia, Blue Cross Blue Shield in the US, CMS in the US. And this is where you do your evidence-based analysis post-regulation. That allows the technology to diffuse, but there's a gap between a diffusion curve that occurs spontaneously ad hoc and a diffusion curve that is influenced by evidence and uncertainty, addressing uncertainty and applying evidence. And it is one of the only ways we have of actually bending diffusion curves, either left or right, but bending diffusion curves. Now, for those in the audience from industry and from academia, I had an epiphany about 2 years ago, which was really the most simple thought I've ever had. I'm a simple guy. So the simple thought was, are we applying evidence at the right part of the diffusion curve? We're using evidence to police the uptake of technology. So we started to look at a different construct. And the construct was, what happens if you apply evidence before regulation? And what happens if you apply evidence in partnership with industry? I really believe that we have a $40 billion healthcare system, and no corporation in the world will survive without research and development. And health systems are notoriously bad at funding research and development. But industry and academia are the research and development components of health systems. So let's take them as partners in the pre-regulation cycle. Let's horizon scan together between industry, health systems and academia, develop technologies, test the technologies. If you're working with the health system, you're going to mitigate risk for investment, and then take our evidence-based machine that we have post-regulation and pop it in there. Now we start looking at effectiveness. You do systematic review and cost-effective analysis in the pre-market space so we can benchmark the technology and find out how it's performing relative to all other technologies. And now we can use those data to harmonize all the different steps that are currently in place to apply evidence to policy, give it to industry, have it regulated, and go straight into the future. Simple, really simple. And we just started this, and we have asked the industry pays for it, using the work. And it's just been started now. We have our first 4 technologies that kick off next week, in fact. And we are positioning evidence into the pre-market space. It's no longer a policing function. I'll put that up just to tantalize you a little bit. That's been done at Mars, through Mars, so it's a neutral space. So what we set up in 2002 in Ontario was this structure. We have the Centre of the Universe, the big 25-person stakeholder group called the Ontario Health Technology Advisory Committee, or OHTAC, senior health executives, experts, health economists, ethicists, a whole big mix of people. The request for health technology assessment comes from the Ontario Health System and also a lot from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. OHTAC prioritizes these requests, passes it to my shop, the Medical Advisory Secretariat. We work with our academic partners at McMaster University, University of Toronto. We have 14 clinics in our unit. We work with experts to contextualize evidence, take it back to OHTAC, who then make a recommendation on the adoption of the technology. And using this process, there's been an 85% traction in policy from evidence for everything that OHTAC's looked at, and I'll show you what we looked at in a minute. But increasingly we began to find that there was uncertainty following the systematic review and the evidence presented to OHTAC. And OHTAC, being really top-notch people, said, we're not going to make a decision. We haven't got the quality of evidence we need to make a decision. So in our innocence, we set up field evaluation studies where we actually did primary research on some of these technologies, and we found to our surprise that the technologies actually performed differently in real time than they did through randomized controlled trials. And there's a line out of Hamlet that says something is rotten in the state of Denmark, which drives the whole play. We began to think something is rotten in the state of Denmark, because all of these technologies in real time, they are different. I'll give you an example of that in a second. The data from field evaluations goes back to OHTAC. When there has been uncertainty, and OHTAC then makes this recommendation. We've also built in knowledge transfer capacity, electronic bulletins, website, etc. And more important, on the left side of your screen, right side of your screen, you'll see how we're getting traction. We're getting traction through adjustment to physician fee codes now. We're getting traction through hospitals adopting these recommendations. We're getting traction through the ministry putting money into the system to allow some of the recommendations to take hold. And probably as important, we now have geographic information systems where we can track the uptake of these technologies by region and report on them annually. That's what we have going for us at the moment in Ontario, to look at all new technologies coming into our system. Works for us, maybe the worst thing in the world for BC. But it's an example of what you can do when you have all the players integrated, working together. When you're looking at evidence, you grade the evidence, grade being a hierarchy against which you can look at the quality of evidence to compare different studies. And where you have high quality evidence, it's very unlikely that further research will change confidence in the estimate. When you've got low to very low quality evidence, you're in trouble. And you shouldn't make a decision based on low to very low quality evidence. This is fundamental. This is something that OHTAC, every time we present anything to them, they look at the quality of evidence which has gone through this rigorous process called grading.